welcome aboard. And I'm glad that you are joining us for this important subject matter today. My name is Wendy Wilbur. I'm the State Master Gardener Volunteer Coordinator, and you all are the Master Gardeners who attend webinars, and I am glad that you are with us today. And I thank you for your cooperation with the COVID protection measures, and I just want you all to be as safe as possible. So we only have one more upcoming webinar, and that is next month, December 16th, a little bit early, and I'm gonna be the presenter talking about Florida botanical gardens. So I'm excited to share with you some of the botanical gardens that I've visited over the last 2 years. So that'll be fun. So also for the webinar, please limit the use of chat box for asking questions to the speakers and not for side conversations. You can also use the question and answer box as well. Let me see. Okay, great. And I hope that you are adapting well to Better Impact and that still goes along. And remember that you get 1 hour as CEU for your attending of the Master Gardener State webinar today. So our presenter today is Don Rainey. Don is an Extension Regional Specialized Extension Agent Specialist. I have it up there as that as well. He is in the Southwest District. He oversees the water resource program there. He really focuses in on urban and agriculture water quality and quantity and supply. And that is what he's going to be speaking about about today with us. And you can see he keeps good company. Here he is with the president of the University of Florida. So Don, before he was our RSA water agent in Southwest, he was the leader of the Florida GI BMP program, which teaches professionals how to take care of our lawns in a Florida-friendly way, following best management practices. It's a very, very important program and is really helping to raise the level of professionalism and protect the environment at the same time with our Florida commercial landscapers. I think without further ado, I'm going to stop share and welcome Don. Thank you so much, Don, for being with us today. We're just thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you for inviting me. Wow, that's probably the best introduction I've ever had. I don't even where you got the picture.
Oh, you can run, but you can't hide. I go on to the internet.
Thanks, social media. All right. Well, great. Yeah, let me get started here. Emily, thank you too for the navigation for today. And we're looking good?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Well, that's a great question to start off with. You know, fertilization, fertilizers, who's doing it, who's not. And here's a lot of you aren't. If you are using slow release type formulations, I did see one come across with a 20-0-10, something like that, with insecticide, which, you know, that's good for some applications, but I definitely would caution about the use of a combo product like that. But we'll talk about that too as we move forward. Yeah, to get started, as I was telling Wendy, you know, in preparation for this, I segment my talks as far as trying to paint a broad stroke, you know, trying to see the ins and outs and become a 360 of the issues that we have, especially here in Florida. So yeah, we'll talk about fertilizers, but also other sources as well. And I hope you have an interest in that. So addressing urban water quality issues, one segment at a time. And this segment that I want to cover today, you know, begin with the geology, you know, our soils and how interconnected they are to the groundwater bodies, surface and groundwater. The BMPs, the best management practices, you know, those common sense, you know, what's required to do those practices. And it really doesn't take that much money to get involved with it. A lot of it is just cultural practices that we'll talk about. Atmospheric deposition is a new name kind of on the block now as far as one of the largest sources, major contributor of nutrient loading in our urban stormwater and thus to our water bodies associated. So I'm going to cover a little bit about that. And then finally, education and outreach. We're all educators in this room, and we speak to people, you know, outside our audience all the time, you know, and so, you know, being able to paint that picture and kind of express the bigger picture, I think will help in assisting all segments of our audiences as far as understanding nutrients and how water moves within Florida and how water quality is impacted from that. So yeah, let's just take the big picture here and think about just from the larger perspective here, from how do we define Florida in terms of the environment? And you can see a lot of the landmass, of course, vegetation below, and of course, water, streams, and so forth. But what's in it? The environment, we have to classify it. Think of it when we say the word environment. We need to think about air, water, soil, plants, animals, and others. And who are we leaving out? Humans. Definitely humans are part of this Florida environment. And so consideration, and there are others, maybe minor considerations, but for the majors, yeah, this is what we're dealing with as far as, addressing environmental issues. So in this segment, I want to briefly focus on water in the Florida environment. And water is considered, a valuable natural resource to us. And it's, it brings people to the state. It's a destination magnet, as if you would call it, for recreation. It's our drinking water. Surface water does provide drinking water, wildlife habitat, transportation. It's a commerce feature too as well, and other associated needs that we rely on our surface waters, primarily our lakes. And believe it or not, in Florida, we have over 7,800 lakes, classified lakes here in Florida. So a lot of retainment of water in their surface area. Surface water like canals also help to control flooding, major control back during the early development stages of Florida. It's essential to our urban development and drainage mitigation and controlling these ups and downs or flow levels, primarily from storms coming in. So, and it's also, again, our transportation, recreational, and other, fishing uses as well. When we talk about natural areas, this is a good picture to have in mind. Our natural areas, I call them ancients. They're not ancients, but dinosaurs primarily. I mean, they've been, around, evolved throughout the years, and they're providing, again, those wildlife habitats, wind and tidal flooding. They do help to buffer from severe storms and hurricanes. And we actually have, defined over 50,000 miles of rivers and streams. So, these are interconnected, and think of this as maybe the arteries or the veins of the body. This is the same thing for our state. They're interconnected through, geography and other means, sometimes man-made, but they do provide a mode of movement for water across the state. Again, these natural areas also to help mitigate nutrient loading, including nitrogen. But, we do have as a state policy and compliance, and, we do have total maximum daily loads, the TMDLs, and basin management action plans, we call BMPs, where the state regulates just how much can be loaded into these areas. These areas are very kind to us in respects of they can buffer a lot of the activity as far as the movement of nutrients within these areas from our activity and our land changes. And so that, but they do have their limits. And then once we break those limits, they're very fragile to begin with. And so we have to be mindful of that and protect these areas. Tidal marshes, again, wetland buffering areas, flooding, provide great habitats. And also we get down to our estuaries, which we have over 4,000 square miles of estuaries. And I like to think of estuaries as batteries. They're providing a lot of energy, not only for our wildlife, but also to handle, again, it's providing systems to handle a lot of nutrient loading that's coming in from these impervious surfaces where we built a lot of urbanization along the coast. And again, they're being very kind to us in that respect of, those systems, how they can immobilize, capture, and reuse nutrients, but they do have breaking points. So just a couple of facts here, surface waters, we're thinking, water flows, they tend to be fast, feet per second. Their aquifers are typically replenished and recharged by these surface waters. So surface water flow may rapidly contribute to larger bodies of water, to other surface waters or groundwater storage. So again, interconnected is the point I'm trying to drive across here.
Hey, Don,
Yes.
I've got two questions in the chat, and
Oh.
one is for clarification and one is to ask you to speak a little slower.
Oh, no. Okay.
Okay. And the Diane is wondering, are the BMPs for agriculture required or suggested?
They're by statute required BMPs to be applied, and that's just came about here recently. Actually, I put a little bit more teeth in those state statutes, the Clean Waterways Act, and so those are beginning to trickle out. One is record keeping, and that is one of the BMPs that's required now, and so that's integration time, I guess you could say, to get the information they need, and also for compliance personnel out of DACs.
And that's through the Department of Agriculture. They're the regulatory body.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dawn. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Good question. Good question. Yeah. So, the last body of water I want to talk about is the upwelling, the springs. We have over 700 classified springs here in Florida. So, you have to understand the movement of water above and below ground. I keep saying that, surface groundwater, and how they are basically one and the same. So many of these springs have been identified, again, as 700 springs. And when I talk about groundwater, I mean, this is a large scale or magnitude of a body of groundwater. I mean, it can be smaller, but, we're talking about the water that's found between the spaces of crevices of rocks or limestone, as you see here in other areas. But it is moving, and it may be slow, but it is moving. So the confluence of water throughout Florida is not so much stagnant. It does move. And along with that, we have constituencies that we've either produced or they're natural deposits that are being released from, for example, the limestone, calcium carbonate, which can affect water chemistries and also structure, as we know, as potholes. Just real quick here, and you can Google this to find the table, but just to give you an idea of where the location of groundwater is below our feet, you can definitely see mainly in the coastal areas, it's very close to our feet. And sometimes during the rainy season, it can be even closer to where we have standing water. And that standing water is actually kind of like the window to the doorway to our groundwater. So we have to be really mindful around these areas, especially if we're applying chemical or nutrients, to our landscapes, or any other practices such as pressure washing or whatever we may have chemical wise. If it hits the standing water, gravity is going to pull it down with the water. Gravity, that's how the water finds itself through down to the water table. And so movement could be rapidly through our sandy soils, which I'll explain more. Oh, and I got to slow down. Sorry. Okay, so to slow down a little bit, let's look at these facts. So groundwater is the principal source of fresh water, and 95% of the public, and actually that's kind of decreasing too. We're relying more on groundwater as well for public drinking water. Aquifers are a major reservoir, and the groundwater is not stationary. Again, like I was saying, it does move, but it moves slowly, and it can move, as you know, with the upwelling type spring systems that we have. It can move vertically or horizontally. And then again, groundwater also moves, feet per month, not so fast as the surface water feet per second. So it is moving, and it is elusive. So what about our native soils? This is the other segment that I want to talk about. So we've had our environment, and let's look at the soils within the environment segment, in particular native soils. One of the things that you might, if you haven't, I would encourage you just go take a look. I mean, this is kind of technical, but you can Google the USDA Web Soil Survey. And this is a catalog. Used to, if you all remember, this way back, maybe back in the 70s, you could go and get a soil survey of your county. And it had maps and it had descriptions of the soil that was analyzed and documented within those counties, and also other boundaries as well. But you can go in and you can find a lot of information about how your actually native soil operates. How does it function? It is alive. It's not static. It does have systems. Every time it rains, Water is somewhat the activator. If depending on plant root systems encroaching in those systems, they become activated and they actually change chemical composition as well. So there's a lot of things going on somewhat daily within our native or mapped soils. And just to, kind of delineate what I'm talking about are those soils that have been classified. So you do have different horizons, as you can see here. The photo on the left, we have a white area, what we call the E zone. Then we have a spodic zone, that kind of darker rust looking color, and then it lightens back up. And that's another zone as we get down toward the parent material of our soils. On the right, same thing, Mayaca forest lowland type soils here with spodic horizons as well, that darker band. But what I'm trying to get at here is just to put this in your mind when we talk about map soils. These are active active soils. They have, they're the native soil, and they have certain characteristics, chemical and physical characteristics. And move on here. One of the characteristics I want to point out here is I don't know if you can, right in the middle of this photo, above this white spade stuck in here, is a root. And you can see around that area, it looks like little veins or arteries, but they're red, of course, rust color, oxidized. It's actually oxidized iron, where these roots have exudated oxygen in order to acquire a oxidized component of nutrients, including iron. So, this is one of the ways this activity is going on from a root system, so to speak. And just by looking at the soils, we can tell, which characteristics are going on just by color and detail within those areas. Just to kind of give you some definitions, or not definitions, but just some words here that I may be spitting out, not routinely defining for you, but pH, you all are probably very familiar with pH, or at least heard of it, but it's the soil activity actually. It's, how fast or how slow things process within the soil. And of course, an optimal range being 7. Bulk density being opposite or the inverse of porosity. We're talking about characteristics of soil movement, aeration within the soil. And I go on down, but just to kind of give you some more idea of these native soils, what to expect. Organic matter is a major one, but in Florida, the soil is very active, and it will, with rainfall and dry spells, it literally burns through the organic matter just because of the chemical reactions that are going on with it. But I just wanted to kind of give you a brief look into this segment. And one of the things I will pull out is the CEC. A lot of times, I'm sure you maybe have used this term before, cation exchange capacity. And it's looking at the total amount of the cations that can be held in soil. And it's very indicative of the amount of organic matter that you have. So the higher the CEC, the greater ability it has to store plant nutrients. And that's kind of touching on the fertilizers again, because we don't want our fertilizers, once applied, the nutrient, the nitrogen moving away from those root zones. And organic matter helps to do that, actually binds it. And so what we want to see is, increased amounts of clay. We want to see a good amount of organic matter within these soils, and the soil pH actually will increase and become more active in utilizing these nutrients for plants assimilation. So when we look at pH, what I'd like to think for you to visualize is that with low pH, 4s to 5s, hydrogen, we get a lot of hydrogen buildup in that soil, and it's blocking these exchange sites that I just showed earlier on the CEC. So think of these are just plugging holes. And so any nutrient that moves through there is just going to fall on through as far as a cation, and it may be, a nitrate form, and it doesn't, it's not withheld in the soil. On the right side though, if you increase that pH, you can increase that cation exchange capacity and through organic matter buildup. And you can hold on to these nutrients. And so, we have to kind of train soils if they're not native, how do we manipulate these soils to hold on to those nutrients and don't allow the leaching or percolation of those nutrients down into our groundwater. So you can see, we kind of have a challenge, especially in our map soils, sandy loam soils, not a lot of cation exchange capacity going on. So, that's one of the challenges. And again, that falls back to right plant, right place. So if we can't, we really don't apply too many nutrients in these soils, knowing that they're not going to stay there long because of our rainfall or over irrigation as well. We need to be mindful of the soil texture and structure. So I've talked about map soils, native soils. I want to talk to you. I did more study here with my graduate work with urban soils, and we looked at a system or a community. And one of the assignments to begin with, what I had to do was dig a hole in my backyard. And so urbanization does create some challenges, especially with our soil and the unique properties that they may lose through the movement of soil, transportation of soils, fill soils, and soils that we need for structure to build on. Those change the function as we know it for map soil. So it's hard to predict what happens when we apply fertilizer on top of it. So this is the common look. This is how things get mixed. We may be on top of native soil or map soil, but once construction starts, there you can see here we have different textures or different structural soils lying here. And after the builder leaves or construction is completed, things get kind of tilled in, mixed up, and spread out. And then again we get sod on top of that, or so there's some other form of plant material. And it has to cope. It has to deal with what is being left behind. And so it's we even have not only organic. We have inorganic debris. We have, things that probably won't break down for another 100 or 300 years. And so a lot of things going on with construction and urban soils. So I went in my backyard and dug a hole about 84 inches deep. And that I had to dig that far just to get to my native soil, my mapped soil for that area. And just some interesting things I want to point out is as scientists, you can't classify these different layers. We don't know what they are and don't know how they react. The physical and chemical characteristics are different. As you see, each golf tee identifying a different horizon, as we may call it. We're not supposed to call those horizons because they're really not created the way a natural soil would be. They're not coming up from a parent material. They've actually been transported in and spread out. So they're definitely going to have some changes in how, if we're applying chemical above, how things are going to move downward. And at the end of the shovel on the right side, you can actually see water. There's a water table down there. And so about 84 inches during the dry season for me, I'm down here in Charlotte County, it's not far away, so to speak. Just another closer look there. You can just see the different aggregates and mixing of native natural soils in with these transported soils to build good structure for the housing foundation. This was a study that I did with Dr. Amy Schober. I was a grad student under her, and we looked at a 5-building phase in Sarasota, and these were new developments coming about, and these are from houses side by side, and you can see that they're not consistent. So, as it is now, cookie cutter approaches to maintaining lawns within a community. Generally, you just have a contract and everyone gets their share. Well, within these soils, we don't know that they need that full share. And maybe they go on down to the next lot where the soil characteristics need more of a nutrient for that plant to survive. And so, there's a lot of technicality that goes into understanding how these urban soils will react. So with new development here on the right, and we have established landscapes on the right, and in the middle of new development, we analyze this. And looking at bulk density, we're just kind of looking at compaction. And as you know, compaction is not a plant's friend. It keeps water from moving into these porous regions of our soil and actually trying to get down, to where these root systems can obtain it. So bulk density was almost concrete. Now at 1.82, we're getting into non-existence of plants. So it's a highly compacted area for the new developments. In the established landscapes comparison, we do have more organic matter, more aerations going on, more porosity. just to go down this list, soil pH. Notice our soil pH is more on the acidic side, beginning with new development. But as we move into a more of established, we do see that coming back up to more neutral alkaline state, which is great for plants and also for the soil retaining nutrients longer for plants to assimilate and use. And so organic matter, interesting. As you can see here, the organic matter in this study was higher and lower in the established landscape. It was probably because of I would say it's the mixing of the soils, bringing in some of the scraped off soils from the first grading and mixing it in. It's situational, so I wouldn't really rely on that as being consistent throughout any landscape. But we did see increases in phosphorus when we compared that, and that was just primarily coming in with the fertilizer. And so that's one of the educational points I want to deliver here is if you don't need the phosphorus and do the soil test, don't add it. You do save money. And like the person that had the 20-0-10, I think, that's probably a wise decision because in Florida, pretty much we have enough phosphorus. And again, phosphorus is a component that will impair water if it does become high in concentration. So just to let you know, that's one of the reasons why we don't need it, and it does accumulate. It doesn't really move off our site. Just more summary here, but I guess the point here is that establishing plants, and I would go so far as say any type of plant, new development, it's going to need some help. And probably the most help you can do is amend the soil. Just let's get some organic matter in there to begin with. And so, knowing that, you can create porosity and reduce compaction and allowing that air and water exchange. So we do, over time, we do see better infiltration. And so that's a good thing. We can look forward to continuous fertilization. Probably not. Again, it's just going to stockpile phosphorus if we're applying phosphorus. And also, if we have a good buildup of organic matter, you're not going to need so much nitrogen. And I'll explain more about those other sources too that are coming aboard that we get those without fertilization through a spreader. Wendy, do I need to pause or are we ready to still go?
I think you're doing great, but I do actually have a few questions and it's a good time to take a little bit of a breath. Okay. And you can have a sip of your water. So Diane Goldberg said she thought that alkaline soils meant less ability to absorb nutrients. Am I wrong? And I responded, it depends on the nutrient. So if you want to talk about the pH highs and lows and depending on the absorption, that would be good.
Yeah, so there's magnitudes of change within pH. So if we give, below pH of 5, the soil activity is going to change, and it's going to retain some nutrients. It's going to bind them to some of the soil surfaces. If we get above a 7.5, 7.8 alkalinity does start to bind nutrients that are necessary for plants at that range. Of course, beyond those are extreme, and definitely you'll see health problems with your plants and deficiencies. So yeah, so phosphorus is a really good one to look at because if you get below the pH of 7, which is neutral, it's going to get bound within the soil with other elements. And if you get above 7, it's going to get bound again with other elements as well, calcium, or we may have iron or aluminum interactions where it's going to get bound in. So there's definitely a small window for phosphorus to be what we call orthate or orthophosphorus complexes the plant can actually absorb and assimilate. So yeah, but the pH is tight at that point for activity.
Yeah, probably the most important thing I learned in my beginning soils class was that chart of all the elements and the absorption.
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot. So we have a question about rainwater. Can rainwater, which is more acidic than tap water, change the soil pH over time in urban soils?
Yes, and we'll be getting to that, but since we're there, we'll go ahead and buffering because not even rainwater, yes, and also reclaimed water. We do see some buffering depending on how that reclaimed or reused purple pipe water is treated, it can also buffer and buffer pH either way. And so, depending upon that, in rainwater too, it's variable through the year. And so there's causal effect from it. Good question.
Right. And somebody asked me to send that chart. I can't, I've been trying to paste the actual image into the chat box. I'm gonna just have to send you a link to it and you all can link on that. And then Bassam in Osceola County is wondering how the roots interact as they move through those different horizons. And I'm gonna let you think about that and I'm gonna tell you, I was on the Mayaca River and there was a cutaway of the soil. I could really see those beautiful horizons so nicely. And the people I was with, I was real excited. I'm like, you guys, this is the Mayaca soil series. You look at it right here. We can see it. We're on the Mayaca River. And they're like, just shut up and keep paddling. Hand me a sandwich. But I was really excited about it. So if you want to talk about how the roots change as they move through those horizons.
Yeah, I mean, through the horizons themselves are chemically different. I mean, that's how we one way we distinguish each horizon, not only by color but by chemical makeup. And so roots, depending on the nutrient, the deficiency, and also the ability for that root to get down through those horizons, they will obtain different nutrients. Now, it's dynamic. Being that if you're within an organic matter state, a lot of those nutrients the plant needs will be obtained in a higher level in the O horizon, that top, and also the A horizon just below that. But a lot of times we'll see those roots going down to mine water, and trying to capture water out of those porous crevices of just the soil itself. So we do see that too. Air is another thing too. Air is, important for those root systems to move as well. Porosity of the soil.
And someone's wanting to know, we really talk about not putting that organic matter in the soil when we plant those shrubs for a variety of reasons, but there is benefit to organic matter. So what do you suggest in that situation?
Yeah, so the rule of thumb I've always lived by is to amend the entire area, and that's probably going to be expensive. But and I do that just because I want the roots to move out with that beyond the hole. Because yes, that's correct. If you do just amend the hole, you're gonna have that root system acting pretty much as a pot. Also within Florida, the ability for organic matter itself to hang around is very, very slim. I mean, it does get obtained by the plants very readily. It oxidizes. It actually just disappears in thin air. And we see that in our histosols down south near the Okeechobee area. They'll subsidence, and through wet, dry seasons, it will dissipate. So amending, your bed, if you were to amend the whole bed, if you can, 3 to 4 inches, or definitely mulch is our friend at that point. We have to regenerate that upper level organic matter, and definitely mulch, having it to recycle. If you have something that's it's more labile that can break down quickly, that type of mulch, fine particle type mulch underneath your course is good. It's going to provide a lot of that recycling for that plant to live, but yet spread out. Those root systems do need to spread out.
Yeah. And then what about, if you have a tree removed or cut out of the landscape, should you try to get those roots out of there, or should you allow those roots to break down and become part of the organic matter?
Well, yeah, I mean, depending on the site, it's going to be, planted. I mean, if it's going to be within a lawn, and those roots are somewhat shallow, I would try to, as much as I could, till and remove those upper level root systems, just because you're going to have fairy ring within about 3 to 4 years. When they start to break down, you're going to fungus, which is not, I mean, it's just unsightly, I guess you could say, but, I do have clientele that really complain about fairy ring. And it's just basically the organic matter breaking down beneath the soil.
Right.
As I would say, leave it there. It's going to create tunnelization for water movement in air over time, and that's helpful for the plant as well.
Yeah. Good, good. All right, Don, thank you. Well, I do have some other good kinds of questions, but we'll handle those at the end.
Okay, let's see if I can get back on track here. So yeah, so I mentioned urban soils, and I know urbanization really hasn't been defined that well. And so I'm going to define urbanization within a stormwater point of view. And the best way to see urbanization is at night. So if you were to take a high altitude look at Florida, you can see urbanization going on at night, and that's just simply by the lights. And we have a lot of it, of course, on the East Coast, and then we have some, splintering up 75 on the West Coast, and then inland too is built up. And of course, you have Mickey there at the top right, bringing in a lot of urbanization. Within urbanization, we have systems of water movement, and just doing a comparison here, looking at natural ground cover, water movement is in the air, it's going down. And there's some infiltration at the shallow systems too for plants. Very little runoff, 10%. Then when we get to building it into maybe a rural area, we have 20% runoff starting to show. We still get that filtration downward. We get the shallow infiltration at the upper level of the soil, and we get evaporation kind of reduced. At the starting to build into part of the suburban area sites, we have communities, we're seeing a change. Our runoff is increasing to 30%. Our impervious surfaces start to increase. Our pavements, our sidewalks, our roadways, our rooftops, and a lot of movement of water is starting to move above ground at that point. We do have evaporation going on too as well, continually. And so when we get into the urban, downtown cities, metro areas, definitely we're seeing less of infiltration overall, and a big increase, 55% or more within our runoff systems, just to control flooding. Actually, it's a safety issue at that point. So, a lot of things that are affecting how our stormwater is managed. And within that, I want to say here, underneath the blue line, as you can see, our nutrient translocation. And it can also be our pollutant translocation too as well. And just to kind of take a step back in time, this is back in 1960s for the Naples area, Port Royal, up in your right-hand corner. And you can see that waterway that comes out and spills off into the Gulf. You can see there was mostly natural areas, not a lot of building going on. And again, we're getting back into the soils. I was talking about earlier, those map soils. We know, and we know what those soils can do. We know what hurts them, what helps them. We know what can preserve them. But we have urbanization, so we have to build. And with building, changes things pretty drastically. And this is just a shot of Marco Island, how it was expanded. It was always a small island, but then to scale, it was enlarged. And to point out, that's a dredge machine here in the middle. I don't know if I don't want to mess things up, but here in the middle, you can see a tiny tractor. That's pretty big. At scale here, we have a lot of soil that's been dug, transported, spilled in, and I don't see a lot of vegetation. So, starting over from scratch with these mixed soils is tough. We have areas then, that build upon them. A lot of housing comes in, mostly, as you can see, you got the lawn, the couple of trees, but a lot of contact with water systems. And as you know, surface waters, they do move, they do fluctuate and move around. So with our biggest impervious surface, not biggest, but one of them is the rooftop, and controlling that water that comes off the roof is important. And a lot of you are involved, I know, in rain barrels, and rain barrels is an excellent example of controlling stormwater. Controlling the velocity, capturing volume is important, and then returning this water out to the natural system or into the landscape so it can assimilate and utilize these elements or minerals that have actually deposited upon our rooftops, and we keep them out of our water bodies. cleaning the drain, I think that's scope 1. So just to kind of overgo, we're going to talk about rooftops. We do have the rain come in from the roof. And again, the runoff will either deposit upon the soil or the land or your property. But given your property may have, pet waste, may have fertilizers, and may have other chemicals, if you have a lot of compaction, where the soil doesn't infiltrate downward over a short period of time, it's going to move. And with that, it's going to take a lot of these constituencies that we see, that we place into our lawns to help our plants grow. It's going to move, and it will find the nearby storm drain and then spillway outlet into larger bodies of water, and then it will keep on moving. And so we're having to put in, structures to help either slow or at least immobilize a lot of this particulate as it goes by, so that we can hopefully utilize it by plants, or plants can utilize it. So we have, the storm drain. And as you can see, it's location, it doesn't have to go far to get to large bodies of water. And keeping the curbing, keeping the impervious surfaces around it clean is definitely important. I was just in a talk, Dr. Evan Bean on Tuesday, and he was talking about, think of your roadway as a dinner plate. And a lot of times, when we go through our dry season, that dinner plate's pretty dirty. And every rainfall that happens as we come into our wet season, washes it, it cleanses it and cleanses it. And each time it does that, we get the leftover, the particulate that comes off that surface into our water bodies. And if it's too much loading, we're definitely going to see impairment. But within the urban environment, we have a lot of things going on, a lot of contact with other substances too. We can find our way into stormwater, especially with development. We have silt that can cause all kinds of havoc for our habitats, for our fish and other organisms that depend on water, good, clean, clear water. So that's important too. Educating this clientele that's actually the builders, to control stormwater is important. And so, we get down to, from urbanization, let's go into the sources. And with that, it's kind of the devil's in the details. I want to talk about just, make sure you understand that when I'm talking about runoff and leaching on the right, these two gifts, I guess you call them, we have the water moving on top of the surface on the top graphic, but then it moves downward into the porous sections of the soil. But a lot of times our soils are compacted, and when they hit, they're going to move off and carry whatever's on top of that soil level with it. And it could be directly down to a drain. So just to kind of summarize too, regarding that urbanization segment, we have rapid infiltration with our sandy soils. If it hits it, definitely important. But, I'm sorry, with sandy soils, this slide's totally out of place here, Wendy. Sorry about that, but way back. Our sandy soils, and understanding that we do have rapid infiltration, poor water holding capacity, poor nutrient holding capacity, and low organic matter, we're going to get leaching. And on these soils where we have maybe some sandy soils that will allow this movement downward, it can connect and move vertically as well, or horizontally, I'm sorry, with down to another groundwater system or contact. So let's get through. These are actually misplaced, but just to give you another idea of leaching is definitely a serious concern here in Florida, especially with our sandy soils. I mentioned earlier about standing water, and this is actually in our GI BMP, Green Industries Best Management Practices Manual for our professionals to look out for these areas. Because like I said, these are kind of the doorways to our groundwater. And this is just a prime example of how we need to educate citizens to be mindful. This is not the time to be putting out fertilizer or chemical with standing water, because gravity will eventually pull these downward, or we may get another rainfall and it will move it horizontally across the landscape again into a larger body of water. So let me cut down into the sources. I know I talked about this earlier, but the sources of nitrogen in the urban area, we use a term called, let me see if it works, Nonpoint source. And these Nonpoint sources, as we've identified through the years, as being simply trash particulates, nutrients, and you can see the results, oil and grease, hydrocarbons, Pathogens such as, from pet waste, heavy metals, improperly storage of heavy metals can find their way into our water systems, and sediment. Not only sediment moving into and causing turbidity, clarity, it can also plug systems and cause flooding events that may be dangerous or cause safety concerns. So Dr. Mary Luss have a bomb up and just out of Tampa at our GREC Center, our Research and Education Center, along with other scientists and grad students, identified some sources that she's found within urban watershed. And so we have them coming from the atmospheric deposition. As you can see, there's a lot of nitrogen complexes within our atmospheric deposition. Pet waste, again, nitrogen complexes. Meaning complex, they could be bound, but then again, they can be translocated to once our microbes start breaking some of this organic matter down. It can put it back into the system as inorganic sources. On-site septic treatment, reclaimed water, we talked about that earlier, and that's really variable depending upon treatment. Fertilizer, again, just bag fertilizer containing nitrogen sources. Leaf litter and plant debris. It does have nitrogen in it, and if it's not cared for, disposed of properly, or returned back to the landscape to break down, it will find its way into our water system. Central treatment effluent, and due to, I guess, good thing, Clean Waterways Act is addressing this, meaning that treatment of septic treatment water that's being released, it is clean, but it's not clean to a standard. Is being addressed so that it doesn't just go right back out into our system, into our waterways. And soils themselves. Soils, again, are active and they can release pools of nitrogen, or they can, withhold pools of nitrogen for a long period of time. But depending on chemical reactions, they can release nitrogen as well into the groundwater system or other systems. So just kind of keep that in mind. One of the ways they found out about this, and this is really interesting, they did a study down in the Tampa Bay regional area, and we had 5 sites. And from the graphic, there's a lot of things going on here, but I guess the thing I want you to look at here is the bottom graphic with the 50, 16, 17, 18% table. This is called contribution. And the highest one, above 50% of contribution of nitrogen, came from atmospheric deposition. And that's just simply deposits out of the air. And we'll talk about how those came about. The other 2 fertilizers, we have 2 inorganic sources here, one being ammonium, another one nitrate, NO3. The nitrate's a concern because it can move down through our sandy soils or other soils that allow porosity and movement of water downward. And then we have soil and organic nitrogen, leaf matter. We're looking at urban systems too, within parks, they're associated near impervious surfaces. We may be creating challenges for our stormwater managers because of the particulate coming from the debris itself. And so that's what we're looking at too. Just not study too hard about this. Sucralose being an indicator of human waste. So we can actually, drop or not drop, but put in sensors, and also analyze the water itself, looking at these different ratios, and we can actually tell where these sources came from. And let's see here. But to really hammer it home, I guess we talked about fertilizers here too, as well as a nitrate-based fertilizer. If it's not consumed by the plant, it's going to move because they're sandy soils, and the soils characteristics are not going to hold it within that system very long. It's going to move. And again, if we have good porosity, and allows for air and water movement, it will move pretty rapidly. It can also volatilize. Believe it or not, if you apply like I'm trying to think of an example of, like a 15-0-15. And you apply that, and it does have some quick release. It has nitrate in it. If you apply it and you don't water it in at least 1/4 of an inch, that's going to volatilize, especially on higher pH soils. And we could lose the nitrogen we just purchased, or they purchased, or whoever, to the atmosphere. So nitrogen is elusive. It can move upward, downward, and very quickly, depending on soil and the cultural practices we use to apply it. All right, back to atmospheric deposition, just to show you, and this is a forest depiction, but again, this happens too in our urban environment. One being from the emissions. Atmospheric deposition is results of emissions. It could be an automobile, could be industry, factories, and we're looking at some oxides and some acids within that, but the nitrogen loading, so to speak, can come from dry deposition or wet deposition. And a great example is this is when the wet season begins here in Florida, you'll notice that your lawn and your plants actually start to green up. You know, not only from the water, the hydration itself, but a lot of times during lightning strikes, it dislocates the nitrate that's in this deposition in the atmosphere, and it falls to the ground as a nitrate. And then nitrate's very, plants can pick it up very quickly. And so we do see a lot of cleansing, so to speak, of the atmosphere during the early rainy season, just because of the rainfall's removing a lot of this particulate out of the air and down to the landscape. And again, we don't have the forest. Just think of the forest, these trees, as rooftops. So, within the forest have the ability to assimilate, mobilize, and, use these nutrients that are falling. Not a big deal. However, when we move in rooftops and it starts hitting the rooftop, it's going to collect. And again, if it moves down into that gutter and out the driveway and to the nearest body of water, and you have 100 houses within that same community that's doing the same thing, you're going to have some impairment. So again, stormwater, a source is definitely a big one, atmospheric deposition, just simply by the way we've had to engineer and control our stormwater. And this is just by my house. I was boating the other day and I said, gosh, I can see daylight on the other side. And sure enough, I mean, this is just coming off a residential street. And without the proper cultural practices going on that landscape, regardless if they're fertilizing, again, the leaf matter, the particulate, all that is important to pick up before it gets out the pipe. I put this in here just as a stop break. Wendy, I didn't know when we would poll the questions, so I can move on.
I think this is a good place to probably take questions, or if you have, maybe if you're only 4 or 5 minutes in the BMPs.
Yeah, this is next to my last segment.
Okay, I think probably, so we're at 1:51. If you want to go until 2, and then we'll take questions after that.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Don.
All right. So picking up with the pipe, kind of keep that in your mind. What practices do we educate to make changes in behavior? And, we really have to market this. BMPs is a big kind of obnoxious word sometimes. A lot of people, best management practices, well, is it best or better? What's better? I'll do that first. So you have to have this discussion, make it incentive based too. So definitely BMPs incentives is very advantageous for us to adopt. One being, you can reduce landscape maintenance expenditures, less fertilizer, less pesticides. That's one way too. We can encourage our clientele. When we get into the industry, we teach this, and they're better educated. They can move what we call more marketable. They can move up the ladder, so to speak. So having this knowledge is important from an economic standpoint. Improve worker safety, believe it or not. Reduce those environmental impacts altogether with the best management practices. And a lot of times it's cultural. When we talk about cultural practices, I've got some examples in here, but just for example, sweeping grass clippings off impervious surfaces is a great BMP, and it really doesn't cost you a lot of money. A lot of times you already have the tools to do it, and you recycle those nutrients back onto the lawn, or you compost, but you can retain and hold those nutrients from getting into our stormwater systems. Just to touch real quickly, how are we educating our industry? We're approaching them, and a lot of it's become, we've gone from the stick to the carrot. And used to it was voluntary, just based on, hey, look, you'll get more clientele because you're going to know how to use these BMPs and cultural practices appropriately. Your landscape's going to show that too, and it's going to be positive. But over time, we've had to get everyone to the trough, so to speak. So it's become a lot more mandated, especially through the state commercial licensing necessary for those applying fertilizer for commercial gain. You know, they have their hands on the handle, so to speak. They're going to have a license, and to get that license, they have to have a training called the GI BMP, or the Green Industries Best Management Practices Training. And a lot of times our county and our municipalities will adopt this training as a requirement to operate within their county. And just to kind of go down through the goals, what are we looking at? Again, it's stormwater. We're looking at educating these professionals to help in reducing offsite transport of sediment, nutrients, pesticides to surface and groundwater. We know those are going to be a problem. We're also looking at the right plant, right place. You know, site selection is important and dictates later on what maintenance may be required. The use of appropriate rates, methods. You know, we have a lot of research going on. We've had, you know, almost 12 years of research going on what do we actually apply? How much do we apply? When do we apply it? What do we apply it to? So there's believe it or not, still ongoing research on that. But just using your basic knowledge of horticultural means and understanding, you can educate this to prevent the pollution of our waterways. IPM, you know, it came out as a doctrine, so to speak, in the 60s. And it's really it's been adopted by the industry wholeheartedly, I would say, in minimizing pests through natural means, or not natural means, but other means other than chemical, if not chemical, you know, biological treatments too. This is another behavior, is actually just using devices, technology as a BMP to prevent the, here we go. It's called a deflector shield. And we use these deflector shields to not only prevent the pellet or the granule from hitting the water surface, we actually want it not to hit the water surface at all. Impervious surfaces, we want to keep it off the sidewalks, keep it off any driveway, keep it off any system that would pick it up and carry it to another water body. So we do have ring of responsibilities. We're a 3-foot setback, you know, from water bodies. If you have a deflector shield, if not, you're going to have to go further back from the water. And this is what we're talking about, staying off the side of these water boundaries using deflector shield. 10 foot if you don't have a deflector shield. And this is just another example of that. A biggie here is watching the weather. Do not fertilize if a heavy storm or hurricane is approaching. You know, we don't want these substances where they can move off target, you know, meaning they can move from your lawn into the nearest waterway, or into the nearest storm drain and into the nearest waterway. And just simply looking at, you know, using common sense, you know, where we apply these and knowing where the substance will go, because once it hits this impervious surface, those prels, there's nothing holding it back within the water flow to move on. Same thing with grass clippings. You know, these are cultural practices as well. Doesn't cost a lot of money. It's just cleaning up, doing your job. Replacing broken heads on irrigation systems, especially if these are reclaimed water systems. Reclaimed water, if it's not going through a third, or what we call tertiary treatment, it does contain both nitrogen, may contain nitrogen and phosphorus, say that. But probability is yes, it will. And we don't need that either within systems. Design, you know, design and, you know, that well thought out design is important to prevent a lot of our stormwater woes. This is just definitely something you don't want to see. You want to correct these. You want to educate people to get rid of one or the other, get rid of the asphalt or the concrete, or get rid of the plant lawn. This is just snapshots of what else I've seen in the landscape that bring down the health of the plant. Not only that, you know, it's once that happens, these abilities for these systems to acquire these nutrients, mobilize them, is non-existent. So yeah, yield to common sense in this, these cultural practices and best management practices. I'm not going to preach to you about the Florida Friendly Yards program because you're aware of that. And all those principles that are applied with the industry, I should say backwards, that those principles that we have are 9 principles in FFL are applied back to the industry as well to follow. And of course, the handbook. Okay, this is the last segment. now kind of want to put all this together. We've gone from the environment down through soils, understanding that, and chemistries and the physical properties, down through urbanization, down through our sources. And now how do we educate? How do we reach out? I just want to spend just a minute here on that. I know I got a minute, but if you can, I don't know, if you got a QR, or you hold your phone up and grab this document. It's called Building Impactful Extension Programs by Understanding How People Change. And as master gardeners, I think this is important, that we can't take a shotgun approach with a lot of our clientele. We have to do them one-on-one, and we have to approach them one-on-one with the right tool, the right message, the right education, to convince them that, yes, we need to be mindful of water quality, and this is how we need to do it. And just to kind of give you an example, there are behaviors or stages of change. And, we have people that are in pre-contemplation. They have no intention of changing because they lack consideration of the issue. They just are not in touch. Or we may have those who are contemplating it, but they need a little push. And so we can design our programs, or you can articulate your message in a way that, inclines them to, toward that change or behavior. Preparation, individuals that plan to act in the near future. We may don't bring them in for another workshop, or, have some type of activity where they can actually demonstrate what they know and how we can educate them further. And that also goes into, the action part too, is individuals to engage in that behavior, and we have to reward it. So, this falls into bringing them back again for workshops or rewards, or identifying that, hey, look, you did these behaviors, and this is what's happening from that. Sometimes this takes a long, maybe it's a long time. Maybe it takes a year. Maybe it takes 2 years to see these changes. It's easy to see grass clippings being swept in a neighborhood, and that might be something that you can, reach out and say, hey, look, you've gone through these stages. We've, brought you up, got you to the end, and then we want to keep you. So rewarding as well. I know I talked through probably 2.5 hours just on this within a couple of seconds, but it's something to think about, that your clientele is in different stages of learning, different stages of change. And when you do have conversations, try to figure out where they're at. And if, that's one of the ways we can make this framework work. I think I'm going to stop there, Wendy.
I think that's a really good point. And we have some really good questions out there and some comments. And I really like that everyone seems to be remaining engaged. And I appreciate that. So Tina Love says, ensuring that your lawn or landscape company actually has a BMP license is really important. And I couldn't agree more. And I want to get your take on this, Dawn. But, I think when we ask, oh, are you GI BMP certified? And they're like, oh, yeah, we are. And I think when the master gardener or the homeowner trots out with their FFL book and their GIBMP, handbook, then they know, oh, these people are for real. They just can't say, yeah, we know what we're doing. Leave us alone, lady, or leave us alone, gentlemen. They know that we are going to be watching them like a hawk and demanding that they are doing the right thing. So what do you think about that, Dawn?
Yeah, so to take that, to link another point to that, we have a model bid sheet, FFL, it's through the FFL department. You can go to the website and look for the contractor's model contract. It's a model contract for contractors to use. And it includes these important steps, these important BMPs that can get the positive behavior that we want from our maintenance personnel. And that's one way we can do it without having, being mindful or being an omnipresent person over it. Just simply having a contract that they sign says, look, you're bound by this, and we can call you on it.
Right. And someone asked about the low maintenance zones around stormwater ponds, and that, some people say 10 feet, some people say 3 feet, some people say no maintenance. And how do you all make sense of that in Southwest Florida?
It's tough. Just because, well, you can see the photo behind me. They want to see the water. They don't want to see the critters, especially those that snap and drag you into it, or it could be, a problem for your pets. So they don't want to see, a lot of, they want to see openness. So that's one of the littoral shelves that we're, educating to put in our stormwater systems. It's kind of a delicate balance, I guess you would say. I mean, with having these low maintenance zones, we're preventing those pellets, those granules from coming off the machine, and hitting the top of the water. They're actually helping to buffer movement. If it's kind of a slope, we have some movement of nutrient runoff. Those plants are there to help buffer that and absorb those nutrients. So it's tough, and educating them why these plants need to be here, why they are somewhat thick and you can't see through them, but it's definitely a benefit to the whole community.
Right. So Mary Jo wants to know, does the Clean Water Act now include non-navigable water systems of Florida?
Oh, Clean Water Act. I haven't seen any revisions on that. And the Clean Waterways Act, that's a state statute from Florida. I'm not sure about that either. I don't think that's in that language at this time. I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
Okay. And Ziggy wants to know, does Sarasota County require GIBMP certification to perform landscape business?
Yes, for commercial applicators, definitely. If not, they advise homeowners to use the FFL materials.
Okay. And Department of Agriculture does check on these people, Dawn. I mean, I've heard that the FDAX inspectors hang out at Home Depot and Lowe's and at Site One to see who's bringing in, loading up their truck with chemicals and fertilizers, and they ask to see if they have their GIBMP license. So there is some enforcement going on there. So have you heard that too?
Yeah, and just to note, there's two different agencies involved here. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection is actually the administrator and somewhat owner of the GIBMP program, and FFL as well, but they have a great relationship with Florida Department of Ag to police. And yeah, now if you see, we used to see going down the road on 75, I saw it all the time. We saw the fertilizer trucks or chemical trucks with just bags of fertilizer hanging on the side. Well, that's a rule. You can't do that now, and they will get fined. And that's one of the things I hear. DAX is waiting on the side of the roads and intersections. And if they see those bags not secured properly, they're going to get pulled over. So yeah, they're definitely minding the road.
But, two questions. Pamela is wondering, since so many people are in HOAs, do we try to work with the HOAs in their covenants to include best management practices to try to mitigate some of these fertilizer impacts?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you could be influential about it. Getting on the board, this is the first step, and getting involved in the policy or whoever's governing is important for you. I think that's a great step. And then use the FFL resources. I mean, we've got a lot of information regarding the covenants and that contractor's model contract, FFL model contract is important too, to engage.
Okay. Do the Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the Department of Ag, do they keep a list of the people who are trained in the BMPs who have gone through that? Great
question. Yes, we do. Actually, through the FFL GIBMP department at the state level, we have record of every certificate that's been awarded. Mm-hmm. And they only need to be awarded that. That's not a renewal type certificate. However, if they're a commercial applicator, they do need to get CEUs on top of that every 2 years, every 4 years, but with only 2 hours required.
Okay, so could they find that on the FFL website, or would they have to go to the DEP website?
No, I think that's one of the FAQs definitely find at the FFL website.
Very good. The FFL website has just been revamped, and I put a link to it earlier. I'll do it again while we're asking this next question. And the last question, Dawn, is we've seen, especially you and I who've been around a long time, we've seen these same issues in previous presentations, and master gardeners are wanting to know, are we making a difference, and where are we making a difference? Are we actually helping to improve the environment or keep it from getting worse?
I think we're helping to improve it. Definitely, you can see the numbers of people trained on the GIBMP side. You can definitely see the massive numbers that we have there. So the awareness part is going out. Another awareness, or not, actually, that's more of a reinforcement, is the FFL checklist. The yard inspection checklist is a great tool too, and I think just seeing by exposure to that, numbers. Rain barrels, number of rain barrels. Not only if, that rain barrel is a great gateway tool, so to speak, to get the foot in the door with a lot of people that's unaware of stormwater, and so that's great. I think we're seeing improvements.
The other thing, Don, I have to think is that, we have the GIBMP training that does not exist in every state. The fact that we have a fertilizer certificate required from these commercial entities, that's huge. That doesn't happen everywhere. And then think that we also are changing policy, at the Tallahassee level. And however you feel about the fertilizer regulations and their effectiveness, at least we are having these regulations in place in our counties to help try to, reduce these impacts from the fertilizers.
I think so. And you may have Kevin, Dr. Kentworthy on before, or maybe next or sometime. They're brilliant researchers in the fact that they're kind of skipping over the continuation of maintenance with plants. They're looking genetically now at how do we put a piece of sod or into the landscape that doesn't require nutrients. It has brilliant color. It doesn't require a lot of mowing. They're doing this, and it's taken years and years of selection. But for those who want, or where we need areas of turf grass, sports fields, but we don't want the maintenance, we can do it genetically. And so we're kind of leapfrogging, so to speak, this hole that we're in with compliance and making sure they're certified. We can take that out of the equation. So I'm really excited about that. I get excited about that.
Wouldn't that be great? Because I think the science exists and the researchers exist to answer some of these questions and take this maintenance issue out of it, would be great.
Right.
Good. All right, Dawn, we are at 2:11. I have to thank you. We had 250 people on at our highest moment. So you did a fantastic job, and you all know that you can contact Don Rainey down in Southwest Florida if you have any further questions, or if you'd like to have your agent partner with him on delivering programs around this. So thank you, Don. We really appreciate it. And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thank you.
Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.